Welcome to the Middle of Vet Veteran Podcast. Okay, Warriors, I'm Chris Elder, and today is episode 98. Can you believe it? 98 episodes. And we are honored to be here with retired Master Chief Tim Kearns, who served 30 years in the Navy's Silent Service. He was the chief of the boat and command Master Chief, and he's here to share key lessons on retirement planning, VA claims, and setting yourself up for success. Can you believe it that we're wrapping up season 1? And this is going to be our 100th episode where we talk about the top 10 most viewed episodes that we have had on Middle Vet. It's a perfect way to end the year and also end the season. And we are going to be kicking off season 2 later in the first quarter of 2025. My goodness, can you believe that? I'm always saying 2025. Hey, don't be a blue falcon. Review, follow, subscribe, and share the podcast to help us reach more veterans and service members. Let's get into episode 98 with Tim Kearns. Hey, brother, thanks and welcome to the show. And, Yogi normally hits record, but yeah, Yogi doesn't control anything.
Yep.
Yogi never has control of anything.
Whoa, easy, Tiger. No need for those shots.
You started first by telling me I was ugly.
Hey, no. I was agreeing with you. There's a huge difference.
I'm agreeing with Chris that you don't have control.
Yeah. Hey, it wasn't on the recording, so it never happened, right? No.
Exactly.
Right,
so how's it feel to be retired now?
Good, real good. May 14th was the day I got relieved off of my last command, and it was such a feeling of relief to be able to look down at my cell phone when somebody was calling me and not be afraid of what was on the other side about who got arrested, who got a DUI, whose day am I going to have to ruin to fix whatever calamity happened in the world. And it was nice that I'm no longer burdened with that. The other part, so that part felt good. The part that didn't feel so good was I'm counting down how many Navy paychecks I got left, and I'm scrambling trying to figure out what job I'm going to take because I've had so many that were thrown at me. And I eventually settled on one, and I'm sure we'll get to that here in a minute.
No, that's, that whole entire process of getting out and counting the paychecks and stuff like that. I mean, it starts off with how many PRTs, physical readiness tests, am I going to have to do before I get out, right? So you start counting that down. And then you're like, oh, shoot, I have no more PRTs. And that means I only got 10 more paychecks going. Okay, so then you boil it down to, damn, I got no more paydays. And then I hear from everybody, don't expect that last paycheck because the auditors are going to be going after after all your finances and see if they mispaid you or overpaid you for anything, and then they're going to pull from that. So, bro, that's
my big goal was to get employed by somebody else well in advance of that last paycheck coming in, so that I had some kind of overlap. And I'm not sure how the retired pay starts. I don't know if it starts day one or if I got to wait until October 1st or how it goes, but we'll be all right now that I'm covered with the job and all that.
I would expect the first month just not to get a paycheck right away. Just sometimes the auditing can take a little bit. So I wouldn't expect the first month. They'll back pay you, but the VA, here's the thing about the VA. That first month, it's no pay from the VA. So if you did your BDD, you're not going to get paid for that first month that you're out, period. That's what I found out when I did my process. So there is a month where you're only surviving off of your retirement pay, and you're not going to get that right away. You're going to get that in the next time that they pay you. But I tell you what, though, that first and 15th, I sure do miss that.
Yeah, I took on a job now that pays me, no kidding, every 2 weeks. So every other Friday, I'm going to get a paycheck now. And then on top of that, I'll get the monthly drops of my retirement pay and whatever disability I end up with.
Yeah, so your BDD, who'd you use for your BDD?
John Hood up at Miramar.
Yeah, John Hood, that guy is the shit. That guy, he's John Hood, works at DAV. And yes, it's a puppy mill when you walk in there, but they're a well-oiled machine. They know what they're doing. And if you have any questions, if you're using John Hood, you can ask him.
So just a personal note on him. He called me on Easter Sunday in the evening because the next morning was my appointment with him, and he just wanted to get a head start. So even though he was having Easter dinner with his family, he called me as soon as he was done. We talked for about 2 hours on the phone, and he went through the 95 claims that I had on the phone, and he was just telling me or asking me questions about how I felt, what was going on with it. Do I feel better or worse than when whatever injury actually happened? I thought I was pretty amazed with him just calling me on Easter Sunday prior to an appointment that I had with him Monday morning. And then when I got into his office, everything that they had told me about copying your medical records and putting them on a thumb drive, I didn't quite do it right. Fortunately, I took him with me and he did it all over for me there. And he had stayed in contact with me all the way through all of my VA doctor appointments. And he was coaching me on how to talk to him. I don't want to make it seem like it's a scam because I legitimately, I had 3 volumes of medical records, but he would, hey, if you're looking for this, go and say this and let them know exactly how you feel. And he definitely took care of me.
Well, I would say that it's not necessarily that is being able to speak to what you're really trying to convey, right? We try to convey different things and we're straight to the point and we're direct and we just want to get it over with, and that tends to bite us in the butt also because that's not what a lot of the doctors want to hear. They want to hear this drawn out whole history of dramatic events that we're not necessarily used to.
Yeah.
And that's where the guidance of those kind of professionals is there to be able to say, hey, these are the things that you're trying to say. This is what you should say to the civilians that are going to be evaluating you. So I think that that's extremely valuable to be able to have that kind of stuff.
So the main reason I offered to do this whole thing is that I had a little bit of a story for you guys, and it's contrasting scenarios about how to prepare for retirement, and it's kind of funny because when you walk into the Navy, you have just people after people after people that are ready to do everything for you because you're like an infant learning to just be alive, and all these people take care of everything for you. By the time you're getting ready to retire, everybody just assumes that you know what you're doing. Now, for the last 5 or 6 years, every person that I've walked by that was at the end of their career, they would fire off and pot shot some kind of advice at me. And it's not like I had a handy notebook to write it down every time. So I tried to put it in the old mental Rolodex and save as much of it as I could. But when I finally made the decision 2 years ago to retire, I didn't even know where to go to request to retire. So I had to start asking questions from like ground zero. Hey, where do I go and what do I do for this? Um, the funny thing is that nobody else on active duty is actually retired either. So not everybody knows. And this is a constant evolving thing where people don't necessarily know always what, like take PSDs, for example, where all the retirements go through one PSD in the world now, and they all have to be shipped to that place. And it's not even in the States, I don't believe. I think it's either in Spain or Italy, one of the two.
I think it's in Italy.
Yeah, it just blows my mind that to get your DD 214, you got to send correspondence halfway around the world for them to send it back. And it just blows my mind when you have people that can process paperwork right up the road from you. So I went about asking or requesting my retirement, and it's not an easy process. And I started 2 years ago. And the reason why I bring this up, and hopefully you can broadcast this out and somebody will learn from it. I had another chief that came to work for me. He showed up in the middle of last year. He should have been advised when he left his last command. He was a no kidding chief that was right at he was at 22 and a half years. So they should have told him that he either had to do an extension with a higher tenure waiver request or to request to retire. And nobody told him anything. So he just showed up. He gets put on my books and the billet-based distribution. And one day I noticed that he had been moved out of the normal alignment and put down into excess. So I called the detailer and said, "What's going on with this?" Because they detailed me another chief in his place. I said, "I already have a chief. Why are you sending me another one?" He said, "Oh, after June of this year, he's gone." And I said, "What do you mean he's gone?" "Oh, he's at higher tenure and he's going to retire, and like his paychecks are going to stop." I said, "Oh, that's interesting because I'm willing to bet he doesn't even know this." So it was about October, November of last year. I pulled him aside and I sat him down. And I said, "Hey, do you know that 7, 8 months from now, your paychecks are going to stop?" He said, "Oh, no, I didn't. Why are they going to stop?" And I explained higher tenure to him. Now, mind you, this is a chief. Had been in the Navy for almost 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
He blew me off, didn't want to listen to me, and he just kept plugging. And I don't know if he just thought maybe this whole thing was going to go away. Fast forward a few months to February of this year now. He does something where he gets in a little bit of trouble, and he looks at me and the captain. And he says, that's it. I'm retiring." So he waited all the way up until 4 months before he was done to submit his retirement request. Everything that took me 2 years to do, he was trying to do in 4 months, and there was no way he was going to get it done. So somehow we got him extended out to November. Got him an extra 5 months, so he had a total of 9 months to do it, and I still don't think he's going to be able to get it. I don't think there's enough counseling out there to tell people. I mean, everybody just assumes that you've been in the Navy this long or the military this long. You know how to do it and what you're doing, and that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and it kind of leads to something that we talk about a lot is we, especially in my opinion, as senior enlisted guys, we have a problem when it comes to advocating for ourselves. We are not as good as we advocate for others. Like it's when it comes to one of our sailors, Marines, soldiers, whatever, whoever you're in charge of, you're incredibly good at advocating for them. But whenever it comes to yourself, we lack in that. And the thing is you're not actually doing your shipmates, your soldiers, any service by being like that. You need to take care of your own stuff. Like that's sailor, the chief that you were talking about that did not take care of his stuff until 4 months till. That's actually an average number, believe it or not, for
Really
people to actually start taking care of their transition stuff. And by the way, that guy's outside of his BDD window.
correct.
He's outside of his BDD window because you have to do it 90 days before you get out. And there's not a chance that his retirement stuff went through in time for him to even do his BDD. So, and with the BDD, which is benefits before discharge, you're allowed to file all your VA claim within a time frame of 6 months to 90 days, if I'm not mistaken. And by the time you get out, that first month, you have like no payment from whatever you're rated for. But after that month, now you're online to get all your stuff. But that guy, he's going to be waiting months after he gets out. And the whole entire process is not as streamlined. BDD puts you up to the top of the line because they get priority. So that's a huge deal, and how much disservice is he doing himself and his family by doing that? Like we'll never really truly understand the turmoil that he's putting himself in. So yeah, bro, it's really surprising when I found out that that's the norm because that's ridiculous, bro.
And and with that, I mean, we mention this all the time, right? And I want to highlight something that you said, Tim. We listen to other people for guidance, and no one that we're listening to has actually retired or gone through the process, right? And most of the time, they're just figuring it out. Either you're the first one or the second one, or you might have a good admin department that has processed a couple of them, but that does not mean that they process them the right way, right? Because most of the time, once you walk out the door, that door is closed and nobody says anything about it.
Yeah.
And we mention this all the time, and as you mentioned, 4 months is nothing, right? The recommended time is start at least 2 years, go through some of the benefits, try to get your mind together, and then move forward with that. Um, and it just, and it's not just him, the service members that you talked about, it is the entire system that is there to let let the system keep going. You're supposed to have the command career counselors have that conversation within the 2 year mark, within the year mark, within the 6 month mark, within the 3 month mark, to make sure that everybody is following those patterns to make sure that they're not going to fall into the cracks,
It,
but it
it,
doesn't happen.
it was a lot easier for me too with being the CMC of the command because I walk in and I just grab everybody's attention as soon as I walk in the room. And like the CCC was right at my disposal. So I'd call them up, hey, come to my office, let's talk about this. And I could easily get one on one counseling. Anybody other than me walks in and does that, not necessarily going to get the same response. Hey, a couple other things too. So you mentioned the BDD and the claims process too. So it's not just the 90 days. You have a window of 180 to 90 days that you have to get all your medical stuff done. So when I was right before 180 days, that 90-day window from 180 to 90 is where you're supposed to, one, submit your initial claim, and then two, get all your doctor's appointments done. Now, I went through the veterans VSO, Veteran Service Office up at Miramar, and I called in February, late February. I should have called at the beginning of February for an appointment in March. When I called February 18th, they said, "Oh, all our appointments in March are gone. If you want an appointment in April, be here on March 16th at 0600 in the morning and get in line and sign up for one of the earliest appointments." I got there. I was the third person in line, and I got one of the first appointments in April, but I had already lost 30 some days off of my 90-day window. And I had to smash the VSO appointment as well as all the doctor's appointments into 60 days instead of 90 days. I was still able to get it all done. The only reason I was able to is because I had a commanding officer that was very understanding of what it takes to retire. He was a former chief that went LDO and eventually made his way up to being the CO of the ARCO. And he everything. I was driving all over Southern California to get to all these appointments. He told me when you have doctor's appointments, just get somebody to stand in for you and just go to your appointments. And they were stacking sometimes 2 or 3 of them a day. And I would drive from La Jolla down to Chula Vista out to Santee for all these different doctors because it's not at a military treatment facility. It's doctors that are contracted with the VA. But my entire claim got put in and everything was done well ahead of time. No, I'm just waiting for my actual discharge date from the Navy so that from what I've seen, if you get all this done on time, it could be anywhere from 3 days after your final day in the Navy to 2 weeks, and you'll get your VA rating. And I'm not sure when payments will start, but it was a very interesting process. And again, nobody trained me on any of this. I just happened to get lucky.
Yeah. And, I'm sure, Tim, you've met a couple other retirees that were retiring around the same. And I know from my own story, I was grouped up with a couple other retirees and we were just sharing all the knowledge that we could find during that time. And that's kind of what kind of led into creating Mill to Vet, was to bring all that awareness that we've been finding to the service members that are out there. Um, do you think that if you were to take your transition compared to the one that's 4 month starting, would you say that you're a little bit more prepared than that 4 monther?
Yes, and I mean it's just because it was something that I was planning for and looking forward to. And I think that he was looking at it like maybe if I don't say anything, they'll just forget about this and I'll keep getting paid, like the guy from Office Space. That's what I liken it to. I'm not sure that.
Stapler.
Yeah, you see my stapler.
He's working years without getting paid in the basement. Okay.
This guy might very well have done that too had I not grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, sat him down, and said, "Look, this is what you're up against." And I eventually put all the paperwork in front of him. And fortunately, I had already just gone through all the requesting to retire and everything that goes into that. And I sat down at a computer with him and walked him through it. All the way up until I left in May, he still didn't have an approved retirement request, and he was supposed to be done in November. And I was coaching him on everything he had to do for the VSO, and it just he's in a nightmare scenario where he's not going to get benefits when he retires. He's going to be without a paycheck for a while. He's got two kids, and I'm holding back his name to protect the innocent.
Of course.
It's just nobody trains you for this. Nobody really coaches you on it, and it's difficult to navigate if you're not asking questions and trying to figure it out for yourself.
And then to include that it's not just that you're dealing with the military, right? You're also trying to deal with housing. You're also trying to set up with possibly getting a job. You're also trying to coordinate with whatever and how the transition is going to be for your medical
Yeah.
stuff, right? And then on top of that, if you add a family, then you got to coordinate all of those things for the children, all of those things for your spouse, right? And adding all of that stress, it can be very, very and extremely daunting to be able to go through that entire thing in a matter of days, right? And then you keep on pushing it, you pushing it, you pushing it, and you're just gonna go. Something's gonna give that you're not gonna get.
Yeah, just in the last 4 months, my plans have changed no less than 10 times for where I was going to eventually land and what job I was going to take. Um, it started off back in March when I kind of had an in the data center industry with a buddy of mine who's the CEO of a company that I served with years ago. And I talked with him, and I was looking to try to get some kind of offer from him back in March with the retirement date in June and hopefully starting around August 1st. He told me over the phone, he says in his industry, it doesn't work like that. He says the furthest out you'll see an offer letter for a job is 60 days. And he said they're like fruit. The longer they sit out there, the worse they get. And they kind of rot. So he wasn't prepared to give me an offer letter at that time. So I was trying to shore something up to make my wife feel a little more comfortable about what was going on. And just asking through my networking contacts that I have, I reached out to the guy who recruited me into the Navy, who ended up retiring as a lieutenant commander LDO back in 2018. He still lives out in Pearl Harbor, and he told me that where he's working, he's on a team of 3 people. It's supposed to be 4, and they could use somebody like me. So I applied for the job, and I actually got hired by the company. I turned it down 2 weeks ago because what they were going to pay me to live out in Hawaii was not enough to live comfortably. The housing market's killing it out there. To buy something comparable to what I'm in now would have cost between 1.4 and 1.7 million dollars. And my entire salary they were going to pay me plus half of my retirement was going to go to mortgage alone. And I didn't do 30 years in the Navy to live poor when I got out. So I turned that job down, got back on the hunting trail, reached out to a few other people I network with, and I eventually got hired by a company called DLB Associates, and I start next Monday. I'm going to be what they refer to as a commissioning specialist. I spent 2 tours in the Navy on inspection teams on the tactical readiness evaluation teams for submarines, and I really enjoyed the work, and that's kind of what I'm going to be doing as a professional for the data center industry. After a construction team puts their blood, sweat, and tears into building this warehouse that holds all the servers, they want to send somebody out to make sure the power requirements are right, the cooling requirements are right. If they have a casualty, do the people that run the building know how to fight the casualty type of stuff? And at least that's the way it was explained to me. I haven't done day one on the job, so I don't know 100% what I'm getting into yet, but I'm smart enough that I think I can figure it out. But I was My plan was to move from California to Texas. I'm having trouble selling my house right now. So the company's been real cool about it. They said, just stay where you're at as long as you're willing to travel. So I'm going to travel to whatever site they need me to go to. And I'll be home on the weekends, and it'll be 3 weeks of travel and then 1 week at home working remotely.
Hey, Tim, I have to applaud you on standing your ground. And most people that are out there, I want you guys to hear this. Don't settle for that low paying job because you have your retirement and you have your disability. You guys are worth a lot more than you think, than you probably even know. Don't settle for that low paying job. Like
I'm glad you
that's
said that.
super
And I
important.
left dollar values out of this on purpose so that use your imagination. I got a great piece of advice from a former submarine captain at one of the conferences I went to a couple years ago. We knew each other through mutual people that we served with, and he took quite a bit of time to sit down and talk with me. At the end of a 45-minute conversation, he poked me in the chest and he says, "Know what you're worth, accept nothing less." There was a little bit more to the story, too. But he told me as a retiring Master Chief that he'd rather hire me over an admiral that was getting out because I know how to get stuff done, and that equals dollar signs. Um, I'm getting into an industry that's in the middle of a gold rush right now, and I'm starting with a kind of not on the bottom rung, and there's lots of room for growth, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to shoot up the ranks pretty quick, and my paycheck's going to grow quite a bit. And it's all about what you're willing to do when you're done too. If you pigeonhole yourself into something where you say, "Oh, I have to live here because of X, Y, Z," it's going to turn a lot of companies off to you unless you can find one that's willing to work for you. Actually, it's kind of funny. The thing that really turned me around on this, because I was completely locked into that job in Hawaii. I was contacted by a recruiter that works over on Coronado Island, and he says that he has a job that I think he thought I would have been perfect for because I was the CMC of a floating dry dock. It was the chief production officer at a ship repair company down here in Chula Vista that has contracts with the Navy, Coast Guard, and military sea lift, and they do a lot of work on the boats and dry dock over 32nd Street. I said, "What's the job?" He said, "Chief production officer." So, okay, what does it entail? He says, "Oh, you got to make sure schedules are kept, budgets are kept, stuff like that." I said, "Sounds a lot like what I've been doing for the last 6 years in the Navy." He says, "Yeah, that's why I picked you." I said, "Okay." He says, "Can you send me a resume and I'll talk with the CEO?" I said, "Sure." They went back and forth for a couple of days, and they eventually got back to me. My original background in the Navy was in electronics, being a fire control technician. They were looking for somebody that had HM&E, specifically welding and hydraulics. And they said, "Well, you don't have a background in that, so we're going to pass on you." I tried to tell them, I said, "You realize I come from the submarine force and they make us learn all that stuff. I might not be a subject matter expert, but I know enough to be dangerous." They said, "Yeah, we're just looking for somebody with years and years of experience. So we just don't think you're the right fit." But the pay that they were offering me for this job, I said, "Holy moly, man, I think I sold myself short on the job in Hawaii." And that was the first thing that really got me thinking, and I turned it off. And then I started hunting for something else.
What would you suggest for someone that is listening to this, that is in your shoes or about to be in your shoes, to start or to use in order to hunt for the right job?
So I've kind of been putting irons in the fire for years, trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I get out, where I want to live, where I want to work. And the more irons you put in the fire, obviously, the more options you're going to have. You have to keep communications open with all these different companies and what you want to do. Um, Goes back to what I just mentioned in the last little bit that I was talking about. Don't sell yourself short. Don't be the first one to talk about salary. "Oh, I need at least this much, or I'm not going to come work for you." Let them start the negotiation by offering first. Uh, Before I settled on the company that I went with, I actually had interviews going on with four separate companies. And I was kind of trying to use them against each other. Well, this one offered me this. What can you do for me? And I eventually settled on the one that was most flexible with working with me, that still gave me, it wasn't the highest one I was offered, uh, but they were the most flexible. And honestly, you got to do what's best for you and your family. I was trying to play as many different directions as I could until I finally settled on one. And then the rest of them, I thanks for the consideration. I appreciate the rounds of interviews, but I've decided to go with employment somewhere else, and they rogered up and they were okay with it. Does that answer your question?
It does. If you could go back in time before you enlisted and you could tell your 17, 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself in order to be successful during your tenure in the military?
So that's a very interesting question. You're asking a 29-year Master Chief that. There's not much more success that I could have achieved. I mean, I could have gone farther, and I could have done more, but um, yeah, I was your typical screw up in high school. I would love to sit here and tell you that I wouldn't change anything because I'm perfectly happy with the way that things have turned out for me. I tell people all the time, I'm a 47-year-old child with no college education. I got people throwing six-figure jobs at me, and it blows my mind. Uh, but the Navy trained me, made me marketable. The two pieces to that, though. I think that's about 60% of the answer, depending on how you look at it, and the other 40% is who you meet along the way and the networking connections you make and who you know. I wouldn't have been offered the jobs that I was offered if I didn't know the people I knew and I made the connections that I made. A lot of people were willing to help me with doing the transition to civilian work. Um, what would I say? That's a honestly, it's a real tough one because I like the way my life's turned out so far. And if I went back and tried to alter that, it might not have been the same.
But not just for you. So for any young um, person that is about to join or has just joined, what advice would you give them to be
All
able to
right.
be successful, to be able to get to where you're at?
Here's a good one for you. I found early on that if you set a long term goal, say 10, 20 years down the road, it's oftentimes something that's either way too easy and you achieve it way too early, or it's way too hard and you give up on that goal before you ever even come close to reaching it. For example, back in 2011, I just finished a deployment. The day we were pulling in, I got three new people from my division that showed up on the pier. Uh, Met a kid who was from my hometown who was going to end up working for me, and he joined the Navy, flew 6,000 miles around the world to land in Hawaii to figure out that he works for a guy that grew up right down the street from him. His first thing out of his mouth was he said he's going to be MCPON someday. This is right after finishing sub school. He had all of 30 minutes in the Navy. Of course, the first duty he gets sent to do is cranking FSA duty on the mess decks. He spends 45 days down there, and he comes back and he says, "Screw this, I'm getting out." So his long term goal of being MCPON obviously blew up real quick. Just recently, about a week ago, I had lunch with him. He's a contractor now. I got out as a first class, and he's living his best life, making a good wage, creating stuff for the next generation of fire control systems that are going to go on the submarines, and lives in Virginia with his wife and two kids, and he's absolutely happy with where he's at now. He did tell me that he wished he would have stayed into 20, and he had the extra income of his retirement to go along with it. So back to the original question, from the beginning, I set a series of short-term goals that were attainable, whether it was a watch qualification. I wanted to be this ranked by this time, and I was able to achieve those. And after I would achieve so many of them, I would sit down, reassess, and do some more goals. It was never one long term goal. It was a series of short term goals that got me to where I was at. And sometimes you stall. I spent 10 years as a chief between 2005 and 2015 before I finally crossed over and made senior chief. And that enabled or opened up a whole bunch more paths for me to go. And it's just constantly reassessing what your goals are and don't set them too far out because either they're going to be too easy to achieve and you're going to sit back all comfortable, or you're just never going to get them.
Now, with your setup so far, because you're not officially finished, right? But you've seen both sides, and as you were talking about, what would you say the timeline? And we talked about it, 2 years, right? What would be the advice that you would give anyone that is, just starting the military or about to finish the military in order to prepare for retirement? What would be the most crucial thing that you want to leave them with?
So I've heard lots of horror stories about how retirements did not go well. And everybody always likes to come up and tell you the bad stuff that happened to them. And I got a whole earful of that. As you make the decision to put in your fleet reserve request, you need to go find somebody who has retired recently and sit down with them and get the horror stories of what they went through and stuff that they had seen, stuff that they had experienced, so that you don't have to trudge down the same path and rediscover all the pitfalls that they had. That's probably the best advice I could give somebody. Fortunately, with as long as I've been in, a lot of people that I grew up with in the Navy, they had all retired before me and they took punches to the face for all this. And I was able to go and ask them, hey, what happened when this thing happened to you? And I was able to get through most of it without much of an issue.
What got you in that mindset of like this is what I got to do for my transition?
Are you talking just making the decision to retire, or
Well, like the whole entire process behind you starting to prepare early, like what was that mindset that got you to do that?
with where I was and when I finally made the decision to do it, I asked a few people I knew that had retired in the last couple of years. I said, okay, I'm going to make this decision. What do I need to do? And they would immediately fire off. Well, eventually, there's a checklist you can get off of the Goat Locker that'll be extremely helpful. There's they told me about the VSO office, and that by far and away the VSO office and your disability claim is the most important thing you can do, and you got to do it in that 180 to 90-day window before you actually get out. And it's not the day you start terminal leave; it's the day you get out of the Navy. So you got to be aware of that. If you're not planning right, they're going to tell you to come back or you missed your window. Uh, it was mainly listening to the advice of the people that I knew that already had retired. And when people experience things, they love to tell stories about their experience with it. So they will come up to you and say, hey, this happened to me. I'm just giving you a heads up so it doesn't happen to you. And I didn't want those things to happen to me. So after they would give me the advice, I would look at a schedule, try to figure out where I could fit things in. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to have a CO who was very understanding and very liberal with letting me do what I needed to do to retire. Not as easy from a seagoing command because obviously you have underway dates and you're not going to be able to make the stuff you need to do. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, dude, you did good, Tim. And one thing that we as chiefs, I think we do really well is we kind of embody what a chief is supposed to be. We go through our entire process that makes us into chiefs. You're not just put on a list and called a chief. You have to go through a whole entire process, initiation or whatever it's called nowadays. But there's a process, and that becomes your new purpose, your new identity. And now that you've retired, what what are you feeling about your purpose today? And I know I normally ask veterans, how did you find your purpose? But I want to know, what do you feel and what kind of feelings do you have towards your purpose being a previous Master Chief, now going to be just Tim, the veteran?
With the month that I've taken off since doing the retirement ceremony, obviously I've had a lot of time to reflect on stuff like this. Um, my purpose now has shifted solely to my family and making sure my kids can go to college and school where they're going to get a good education, making sure that the mortgage payments paid so that we got a roof to live under. Um, all those things were kind of secondary to my job in the Navy, where I was going to sea and I would just get my paycheck, deposit it in the account, and let my wife pay the bills and stuff. It was a guaranteed paycheck as long as I didn't mess up what I was doing. I knew that that was never in danger. Now I know that my purpose is to make sure that I stay employed so that we can maintain the lifestyle that we have and enjoy these years after all the military service. Granted, I'm going to be traveling a little bit here at the first, but that's okay.
So from your transition, have you, and I know we went together to TAPS class, and we've talked and we've maintained a lot of really good connections throughout the last 2 years. Have you found something that was extremely helpful, i.e., a book, a podcast that shared some of this information that was viable to you?
In terms of like a book, the book that they gave us for TAP class, the one that I went through with you 2 years ago, and it was a smaller, condensed one that I went through a year ago. Those were helpful, but I tell you, the networking and conversations I had with people were the most helpful. Talking with people who had already experienced it, the things that they were going through, to assist with the right decision making and choosing of paths to go down. Uh, that helped me the most with people who had already experienced it and just talking with them.
Yeah. So, speaking of networking, what is the best way for people to get a hold of you? Keep in mind, we really strongly promote LinkedIn. We're not
I'm on
sponsored by
LinkedIn.
them. Yeah. So, what's the best way to get a hold of you on LinkedIn?
Uh, LinkedIn profile Tim Kearns. I still have my command picture up there. Command Master Chief of the ARCO in San Diego. I got to change that here soon, or the new company might get a little upset with me.
You're the command chief of USS Backyard now.
Yeah. Uh, it's weird where I don't have a revolving door of people coming in with, hey, can you help me solve this problem? Hey, can you help me solve this problem? Now I'm just limited to my family, and that's easy. Uh, I I kind of hesitate to put my phone number out here if you're broadcasting this. No, okay. So I'll tell you what, they can reach out to you, and if they need help finding a job, I can assist with that, and you can put them in touch with me. You
Yeah.
guys know me.
Yeah, man. We'll definitely, the LinkedIn thing. We tell people, we do get some people that like put their phone numbers out. We're like, hey, you put your phone numbers out, be ready to get some weird phone calls. So we strongly promote LinkedIn. It's the best way to connect professionally. And yeah, bro, and you guys will be able to find Tim's profile on there. Hey, Tim, thanks for coming on here, uh, sharing your story while you're actually in your transition. Is there any last words or tidbits of information that you feel that the listeners need to hear before we sign off?
A couple little tidbits, thoughts that bounced around my head. If you're a perfectionist and you're going to do a retirement ceremony, the only people that are going to know that something went wrong are the ones that did something wrong, because most of the people that come to your ceremony are going to be so blown away by the entire uh, ceremonious atmosphere, all the people in uniform. My family that flew in from out of town that had never seen anything like that, they were raving about how awesome it was. But in my head, I was thinking about things that I messed up in my speech, and I'm sure that other people were doing the same thing, and nobody really cared. It was just the event and the spectacle of all of it. Nobody noticed the little errors that were made. So don't sweat the details when it comes to your retirement ceremony. Pick a couple of friends that you trust and let them be your sponsor and master of ceremonies and take care of all of it for you. I had zero visibility on anything that was going on with it all the way up until the day of my rehearsal, just prior to. And it was good that way because it gave me more time to focus on the things that I needed to do to prepare to get out, as well as having family members come to town. So that's one small piece of advice. Um, Advocate for yourself. When you have a doctor's appointment, you can't miss those VA doctor's appointments. If you do, you're going to be put to the bottom of the barrel and lowest priority when it comes to giving you your BDD. Um, it's going to be difficult because not everybody's going to be in the same situation I was, where you have a captain that's understanding of what you're doing, and whatever position you're in might be vital for something. And hey, we scheduled this weapons move for the same day as your doctor's appointment. You have to be here for the weapons move. Well, I have to do this doctor's appointment because I'm talking about my future here. Advocate for yourself. And ask as many people who have gone through this process as you can for advice on how to do it as seamlessly as possible. There's my three tidbits of advice.
Tim, we want to thank you for coming and sharing here. We would love for you to come back to get a quick recap of after you're already out, and then see it from a different perspective, um, and share those perspectives, right? Right now, you're going through the transition, you're about to retire. I'm sure that if we would have recorded this 2 years ago when we were first um, we're going through, a lot of things would have been completely different, and the perspectives would have been different, right? And now that we're here, things have changed. So, and we want to give that perspective to be able to show the flexibility that happens, right? All the things that change, and you mentioned a lot of them. And so, thanks again. Thanks for coming here and sharing these opportunities and these ways for people to be able to make a better informed decision of moving forward.
All right, so made the decision I was going to retire in about June of 22, June or July of 22. Started marching down this path all the way up until the end. It was around March or April of this year. The two-star admiral who was in charge of SubPac and in charge of all the submarine commands in the Pacific decides to come to San Diego. I had served with him in the past, and he came to my command. I hadn't seen him since about 2018. He didn't recognize me on the quarterdeck of the ARCO, and there was a submarine that was inside the dry dock. So he shook my hand, walked past, went up toward the submarine. Afterwards, he wanted to do a call with the submarine leadership as well as the senior leadership from the ARCO. So we all went and sat down for a 45-minute conversation with him. Halfway through the conversation, he looks at me and recognizes me in the crowd. Kind of stopped for a second and then kept going with all the stuff he was talking about. And at the end of it, he says, "Oh, I got to get on to my next thing." So everybody stood up, did the attention on deck. He went and pushed 3 people out of the way just to come over and shake my hand again because he recognized me and realized who I was. And he said, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm the CMC of the ARCO." And he says, "Man, that is such a waste of your talents, and you should be on a warship somewhere." I said, "I don't disagree with you." And we talked for a good 5-10 minutes after his conversation with the sub crew was over. And like the Commodore was standing over on the side, and he was glaring through me because I was throwing the schedule off. And I said, "I didn't make him stop to talk to me." But as he's talking to me, he asked, where are you going on from here? And I said, "Well, I'm retiring in 3 months." And he says, "Man, what dream job can I offer you to keep you in the Navy?" This is a 2-star admiral that's in charge of all submarine commands in the Pacific. I wasn't ready for a question like that, so I just looked at him and I said, "I'll have to get back to you, sir. I can't answer that right now." And I actually kicked the idea around for a couple of weeks, and I eventually sent him an email, and I said, "Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time out during your busy schedule to talk to me and make an offer like that to me. However, I will have to respectfully decline." No sooner did I hit send on that my former captain from my Cobb tour, who's now in charge of nuclear policy over in Germany, he writes to me and he says, "Hey, I just found out I'm going to be the next CEO of Subschool. You sure you don't want to pull your retirement and come work for me again?" And it just, all the way up until the end, they were trying to hook me back in, and it just blew my mind. Stay on your path once you make the decision to do it, and don't let somebody talk you out of it, unless it's for a really, really good reason. I guess last piece of advice there, but I was humbled and extremely blown away the fact that two very influential and powerful people like that would offer to keep me going on this journey because they saw what I was doing was good.
Yeah, brother. Hey, thank you for coming on here, Matt, and sharing that last story. Brothers and sisters that are out there listening to this, hey, we got Tim. He is retired. By the time you hear this, he will be retired. MASH chief. He served his country, and he has shared his transition story with all of you guys. Make sure you guys go to LinkedIn, follow him on LinkedIn. No, we didn't put his phone number out, okay, guys? So no spam calls this time. So, hey, remember, it's your transition, so take charge of it. It's not all rainbows and unicorns out there. Mill the Vet, out.